latest in the comments. So you've got some reading this weekend. Don't know. This is here if anybody wants it. Our final feature reader for tonight is Rachel Ray. She's a writer living in Austin, Texas. Her work has been published in Two Serious Ladies, the Oklahoma Review, and the latest, which I'm going to link you to, Hobart. She mostly grades essays, but sometimes finds escape in beautiful people and places around her. Her favorite ice cream flavor is apple pie. Yeah. Rachel.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. Hopefully I'll be able to project loud enough. I also have that problem speaking. So this is from the very beginning of a book that I'm working on. I'm not going to read too much, but it's a couple different sections. Okay, it's called Bilbao. In Bilbao I went through heartbreak that was less complicated than any other heartbreak I'd had in the past. It was simple because I was poor and alone, and in the depths of my distress I was both vulnerable and bold. I was too much maybe at that point to take on. My mind was caught between more than two languages, while my body pushed itself past cheap clothing and lights that turned color beneath my feet. I rented a room in Indauchu with a Russian immigrant who I met by answering his ad for an affordable room near the center of the city. He was a bit older than me, but still in his early 20s and dressed like a punk, which was fashionable in Bilbao for some reason. He always wore these tattered bleached jeans with a studded belt and spiked his light hair toward his forehead with too much gel. He was sitting outside an empty bar when I first met him and waved me down. "I'm glad," he said, standing from the flimsy patio chair and kissing my cheeks. "I come from Russia. Are you Angela?" I nodded, relieved to hear English outside of the hostel. I hadn't yet ventured far from the bus terminal and had never seen Indauchu. It was a relatively recently developed part of the city with wider streets. Young Chinese immigrants sat in chairs out front of their empty clothing stores. "I thought it was you," Vlad said, smiling coyly and pointing at the drab building behind him. "The apartment is here. Should we go?" In the elevator, I nodded while Vladimir spoke and took nothing in, which is what I was used to since arriving in Spain, thanks to my rudimentary grasp on Spanish. I liked the Europunk look of Vlad. He was gutsy and young and spoke at least more English than the Spanish girls whose ads for rooms I had answered that morning. The Spanish girls, though probably nicer and cleaner than Vladimir, were intimidating, and I liked how close Vlad got to me when he spoke. His playful expression, how excited he seemed. Boxes lined the front room and entryway of the apartment. The open room was the size of a closet, but it held a strange appeal that went along with everything I noticed about Vladimir and Indauchu. He started to comment on the room's erratic furniture from the hallway, while I scanned the naked mattress and encouraged the way he looked at me and the monologues he went into about the apartment and his online magazine, which I stupidly believed was some kind of actual publication. A coffee table took up most of the space the little room had to offer. A cheap desk lamp packed with dust and paper clips was on top of it. In the corner of the room was one narrow window about as long and as wide as my forearm. Each aspect of the room intrigued me. From the window I could see the roof and the tips of all the neighboring roofs, and it was easy to romanticize the beat-up mattress and the deep blue color of the walls. When he finally asked me if I wanted the room, I nodded and smiled in spite of myself, happy to live with him in that tiny blue room in that cramped and poorly insulated apartment. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly what was so attractive about Vladimir's chapped lips and messy kitchen. Something about the mismatched plates lining the shelves, the cow-print tablecloth, even the window in the kitchen, the focal point of the whole apartment, seemed to welcome me inside and welcome me officially to Spain. Vladimir opened his arms out the window and turned back at me, smiling. "This is my city," he said triumphantly. I felt immediately happier than I had ever been. I spent the night before my flight to Spain surrounded by a pile of cheap lace dresses I couldn't decide whether or not to take with me, looking up the weather in Bilbao on my laptop in a kind of daze. Never mind my inability to understand Celsius. I didn't even convert it, and watched my brother from his video game haven in the basement. "Should I bring this, do you think?" I asked him, holding a pea coat to my shoulders. "A coat," he laughed. "It's Spain." His curls were long then, past his eyebrows, and he could still laugh a real laugh around me. I left too, excited, a rare form of happiness. It's difficult to explain, but in my opinion at least, once we moved to the suburbs, happiness was largely hard to come by. My brother and I both felt indebted to our parents for moving us across state lines, and we wouldn't dare let our grades slip. I barely slept, and I hated everyone I went to high school with besides the valedictorian. He was different. My attraction to him was different. He smiled, and I felt less alone, understood. He sat behind me in English class my senior year of high school, and when our teacher told us to partner up, I looked at him and patted the floor next to me, unafraid. We stayed friends in college and used to walk up the hill that led to the dorms together in the winter when the wind blew straight at us, daring us to stand. I remember the way his face looked in the cold, wind-torn and colorless, where he'd put his shoes after we got inside his dorm, the scratchy green couches, the laughter of his roommates. Then there were the questions I could never answer, and the stillness finally in his well-kept bed, my head always out the window, my nerves shot, waiting for something groundbreaking to happen. When he told me he couldn't see me anymore, I bought a huge Jimmy John's sandwich and spent the day reading extremely loud and incredibly close on my dorm room bunk bed. The Dave Matthews poster on my roommate's wall, my only company. I'd been sold the idea of college, so when I got there and the dorms were ugly and a girl I remembered from high school lived on my floor, I wore rubber bands in my hair and avoided everyone. I started talking to Rob because he was there. Rob had one of those faces that was difficult to see, dark-rimmed glasses, a strong, stout nose. I remember staring across the table at him at a coffee shop, trying to figure out what he looked like. He wore clothes exclusively from thrift stores and lived in a studio with a tile floor and a large plant. He had a TV and a lot of stuffed animals he tucked underneath his covers. When I told him to grow up, he said, "Teach me how, Angela, teach me how to grow up," as if his sad life was somehow a sad reality in a way. Rob was a poet, and I wanted to know how it was possible to make a living as a poet. He talked a lot about Wisconsin and appeared so old to me at 40, a lifetime older than me, but he kept calling me brilliant. He'd say, "I cheat on my girlfriends. I'm afraid I'll do it again." We were lying in his bed, staring up at the popcorn ceiling, and I was afraid to sleep with him, not for the reason I told him, that I didn't want to get pregnant, but because he seemed to swim through my legs like a bald missile, his head darting toward mine like an arrow I didn't know or even want to control. I told him something like, "Why don't you just stop cheating on your girlfriends instead of pretending you don't have a choice?" "You're so brilliant," he'd scream at me angrily. I figured he must have surrounded himself with people who were incredibly dumb in Wisconsin, or that he was lying to me so that I would feel confident enough to agree to sex. When I think of him now, all I remember is the big blue vein in his arm, how it suddenly grew larger when I told him no. The walk I took from downtown to his place, the dew in the grass at night soaking the canvas of my shoes, and the lecture I got when he picked me up from a party, opening the car door, walking home, all the walking I did in Lawrence. After the valedictorian, I didn't care about anyone. I go through phases of needing to dance, of needing to be looked at. "You can't just disappear," a classmate said to me. We were smoking cigarettes during the break for our night class. Almost no one else was on campus that late, and we stayed out there talking until everyone else from the class had already gone back inside. I'd avoided him after getting drunk at his place the previous weekend, and then showed up to class as if nothing had happened, or as if it didn't matter if anything had. His eyes wide, mine calm, curious. It's hard to need something you can't explain and hardly ever get from people, especially when those people deserve what you can't, for pitiful, superficial reasons, give.